Okay, guys, welcome back to the show. I've got a very special guest on the show today, a man that you probably know from the TV screens in the WWF and the WCW back in the day, Mr. Reno Riggins. How are you doing today, man?
I'm telling you what, I'm doing great. Life is great. I'm good. Yeah, super.
What are you up to? What are you up to these days, man?
You know what? Just being a husband, being a dad, and just living the dream. Me and my family has my dad and I have had a auto paint and body shop here in Nashville, Tennessee, for the last 47 years. So now that I'm not getting thrown on my head every day, that's how I spend my time. We're running our family business, and and it's actually exploding. The last 5 years, we've had double digit growth every year. So life is good right now. So, and plus, I have two wonderful sons. One's a sophomore in college, and one is a sophomore in high school. And so just enjoying them and supporting them and their ventures, and just kind of enjoying life day by day. Very
Make it up.
blessed.
Yeah, make it up for lost time spent on the road all those years, I guess. Is that the hardest thing about being a wrestler?
Yeah.
Is being away all the time.
Well, I tell you what, I was pretty fortunate in that regard, because I was young, I was single. I mean, my home was my suitcase,
Yeah,
so I didn't, like when we would get days off and they would say, well, hey, do you want to, us to fly you back home to Nashville? And I would be, no, I'm gonna, go to Vegas or go to the beach, or I'm gonna go do
yeah,
something, something like that. So instead of
yeah,
them sending that money to fly me back home, I'd have them send me someplace like that, hang out a couple of days, and then back out I would go, And so I didn't have kids until my wrestling career was totally over with, and I knew I was going to be, home every night and not on the road. And the reason I say that is because I saw so many uh, wrestlers. Because, like I said, when I was there, I was really young starting out, and I would see guys that were in their late 20s, early 30s, who were already married, already they 3 or 4 kids, and I just saw how miserable they were when we were on the road. They want to be home with their family. They want to be with their kids. And
yeah,
so, a lot of nights, we're on the road. Christmas night years ago, that was one of the biggest nights in all of wrestling, Christmas night. And Thanksgiving here in the U.S. was a big holiday, and everybody wants, that's the time to get together and be with your family. And so I just saw how miserable those guys were, besides the holidays, but also, hey, I'm not going to be there and see you off to the prom, or I'm not going to be there for the
yeah.
birthday, or I'm not going to be there to see you play Little League Baseball, or whatever the case, your soccer match, or whatever the case was. So I saw that and kind of put that away in the back of my mind, thinking, I don't want to do that. So me and my wife, we were married in 95. We waited 7 years before ever, having kids. And really it was just kind of a thing where, I was gone a lot, and life was good. And then all of a sudden, when I knew I was hanging them up, it was, my wife was like, all right, let's get started. Let's have a family. And so
Yeah.
that's how we kind of approached it. And I don't know if it was just kind of just seeing that on other guys' faces, and I just didn't want to go through that. So fortunately, we planned a little bit, and here we have it. I got two wonderful boys. My oldest one, when he was coming through high school, he wanted to pursue a career in pro wrestling,
Okay.
and
Did you warn
I
him?
told him, I said, oh, always, always. I became that old grizzled veteran that when I was young and trying to break in the business, and they're looking at me thinking, why do you want to do this? What's wrong with you, kid? And so I realize now, from looking back at my past, of the old veteran wrestlers really trying to discourage you to do this. And so I became that guy. And so I told my son, I says, you're a lot smarter than me, whole heck of a lot better looking and more talented. So he's pursuing music and dentistry. So
Okay.
that's his two. He's got one that he can be artistic or expresses, his inner, self, and which I think everybody has in them. And wrestling was my canvas to be creative. And so that's his. And my youngest son, he's a baseball player. That's what he's into, and he pursues music as well. So I'm good with that, and Mama is good with that. So happy wife, happy life, and everybody's good here.
How did you make that decision back in the day that you wanted to be a pro wrestler? How did that come about?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was in college and just lost, not prepared. I was at the University of Tennessee, and I was thinking I was going to just, walk on and play football there, because I'd played played football all the way up through senior year in high school, and was going to go out there and play there. And I was a pretty decent little player. However, unless you are fully committed, sold, and your heart and soul is sold into that, it's very, very tough, And so I was there in college and just miserable, not knowing, because it seemed like all my other friends kind of knew what they was wanting to do. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a physical therapist, or I'm going to be a nurse, or I'm going to whatever. And here I am having no idea and thinking something's wrong with me for not knowing. And so I was there one day, and there was either a wrestling magazine or a Sports Illustrated, but it was some type of publication, and it showed a picture of Hulk Hogan, and it said America's highest paid professional athlete. And I grew up watching wrestling and was a fan, like, any teenage kid at the time. And I thought, you know what, that's kind of neat. And a friend of mine kind of said, well, if anybody could do it, you could do it. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of, well, you know what? He's right. So here I am, not knowing what I'm going to do tomorrow. And here's this guy pretty much in the same boat I am, but I'm listening to him. Right. So I left school. I left college. I packed up in the middle of the semester, came back to Nashville. My parents, I show up one day and my parents are like, well, what are you doing home? And I says, well, I figured out what I want to do. What is it? Do you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, all these things, an engineer, And I was I'm gonna try to pursue a career in professional wrestling. And they looked at me as if I was getting ready to join the circus, which my dad says that's what you're getting ready to do. You're getting ready to join the circus, right?
Yeah.
So, but my parents, after the initial shock of all that, they were, okay, well, if that's what you're going to do, then failure's not an option, and don't stop until you get to what your goals are going to be in that industry. And so I appreciated that support, but it wasn't like, a lot of financial support either. I was working and kind of going through that, but also at night trying to, travel here, there, and be a pro wrestler. And that was very tough back then as well, because the industry back then, it was a very closed door. You either had to really know somebody, be a family member that knew. I mean, you just didn't walk in off the street to do that unless you were 6'9" and 300 pounds, like Sid Vicious. Sid was in the training class with Tojo Yamamoto, who trained me. And so you look like that. Yeah, maybe we can do something with that guy. But you look like me. I don't know, So, but it was very, very hard to break in. I go see Tojo every Saturday night at the fairgrounds. Miss Christine Jarrett, the mother of longtime promoter and wrestler Jerry Jarrett, grandmother of Jeff Jarrett. Yep. She told me to go talk to Tojo Yamamoto about being a pro wrestler. And so I went and talked to him every Saturday night. He'd run me off, no, I'm not doing it, not doing it. So then I'd go back to Miss Christine and I'd say, well, he tells me he's not going to do it. I don't know what to do. She goes, just keep going back. So I kept going back. So after about a month, he says, okay, be here tomorrow morning. And it's Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. And we're going to, and at the time I didn't know. I just figured he's just going to meet me down there and work me out or whatever. But he had a wrestling school going on. He had about, 9 or 10 guys in there working out. So I'm sitting there watching. I'm watching for a little bit. And then he says, okay, go get a trash can and put one in that corner, one in that corner, one in that corner, and one over there. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm getting ready to clean up the arena. I don't know. And then he says, run. And so I ran the Nashville Fairgrounds Sports Arena, which is a legendary wrestling venue. I mean, it's anybody who's ever been anybody has wrestled in that building at some point or another. And so I ran and ran and ran. And finally I got tired and I went over there to him and he goes, I didn't tell you to stop running. Keep running. And so I kept running and I pretty much ran the whole time they worked out. The trash cans in the corners was for me to throw up in, but I was too naive to understand the bigger picture of what was going on there. He was trying to run me off. It was like I said, that business was a closed door business. Yeah. So then he said, well, how you think you, at the end of everything, how you think you did today? I said, well, I ran a lot, He says, okay, well, I'll see you next week at the same time. Next week comes back. I show up, same treatment. This goes on for about a month. All these guys are in there, going over headlocks and takedowns and all this. And I'm watching as I'm running, So after about a month of that, I was just thinking, well, this was just part of it. Like I said, I was so ignorant to life. I didn't realize he was trying to run me off. So I just kept coming back. I didn't know. And so finally, after about the fourth week, he said, I got there early. I set the trash cans up and I was getting ready to be told to run again. And he says, you're going to get in the ring today. And that was all I wanted to hear, all I needed to hear. And so I trained with Tojo for about a year and a half. And I know a lot of times you hear these stories of guys working out with a trainer for about a month and, okay, let's go have a match. And back then it was really old school because he didn't want me to go and step in the ring and me be a young protege of his and not do well. Mm-hmm. Because that's I'm his product. I mean, I don't want to get out there and he didn't want me to get out there and mess things up. And they're looking at him like, well, what did you teach this kid? You didn't teach this kid nothing, right? So he slowly, started us out. And as me and one of my longtime friends, a guy that I had the very first match with, and we were in the class together, and his name was Major Yates. And we had wrestled each other for about a year and a half, and we'd had our very first match with one another. So that was pretty fun, and the business was so kayfabe back then. It was so secretive, and we knew all the wrestling moves, but we didn't know the lingo. And so Tojo, on the way to the event, both of us are riding in the car with him to the event. We have no idea we're getting ready to wrestle each other, and he tells us, kind of smartens us up on the way to the event, which is kind of funny, looking back on the whole thing. We're so young and naive, but just kind of, we knew those guys aren't really killing each other, but we don't know all the tricks of the trade, I guess to say. So he ends up smarting us up on the way to the venue. And after that, it was, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. And after that, wrestled at every little podunk fair and every National Guard armory and any place they could gather 10 or more people. I was out there wrestling and trying to get to that next level. My main goal when I decided I was going to do this was to make it to the WWF. And that's what it was back then, was WWF, World Wrestling Federation. Or maybe some of your younger listeners that are listening that don't quite know. And so that's where I wanted to go. That was the the major leagues, or that was the highest level you could go in the industry. And so that's what I wanted to achieve. And after a year and a half in the business, I was there. And it was very, it happened pretty fast for me. But there was also, a lot of learning along the way, kind of learn as you go type of, because I mean, here's the thing, in this industry, everybody starts out being very bad. It takes a while to learn and season and well, this didn't work out or that worked out. Maybe I ought to try this or shouldn't do that. And so you're just, it's just over time, you have to put it all together. What are my abilities? What do I do best? What's my weaknesses? How can I hide my weaknesses? And how can I exploit my strengths? And so that's kind of the process that I used. And fortunately, it was enough to get me to WWF. And, by the time I was probably 23, I'd probably wrestled the equivalent of every major star in the world at that point, or at least U.S. star. I know there's wrestling in Japan and Europe and these other folks, but the majority of the people in the world, for the most part, have, watched, WWF. And so I'd wrestled the best of the best, at a very, very young age. So,
yeah. You mentioned Hulk Hogan there in the magazine or whatever it was that you seen that you decided to go into wrestling. How was it meeting? I guess he was your hero then at the time. How was it meeting him actually in person? Was it surreal?
I tell you what, I was there was a lot of folks that I was enamored with that kind of drove me or my style of wrestling. One of them, and really Hulk Hogan I admired his showmanship. I admired the way that he commanded an arena when he entered it. Now, as far as his wrestling abilities, and I don't mean to speak ill of anybody, and he'll be the first guy to tell you he wasn't the most technical sound guy, to ever jump in the ring. But I always really enjoyed the guys like I enjoyed Randy Savage growing up, and those guys had a few years on me. So they was already very, very well established by the time I came on the scene. So, but, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is another one. Of course, Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express. Since I'm not, 6'7" and 450 pounds, 5'10" on a good day and maybe 220 pounds. I'm a good throwing weight for those big guys. However, my style fit more of the athletic guys that were more technical in the ring. And so I always enjoyed more working with other guys that followed that style, because that's the style that I enjoy. That's the style that I learned from Tojo. I loved working with Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. Had very good matches with him. Owen Hart, Bret Hart. Me and Barry Horowitz for a long time were tag team on WWF, and we had great matches with the Steiners, the Smoking Guns.
You had a lot of matches. A lot of matches with Virgil as well. A lot of matches.
Oh yeah. Virgil loved wrestling. Loved wrestling Virgil. Virgil about killed himself one night. We were in a match, and I think we were in Toronto at the old Maple Leaf Garden. And on Virgil's boots, he was trying to wear these tassels that hung off of his boots, kind of like a little bit like what the Ultimate Warrior had, I think, at one point. And Virgil, he was making his big comeback on me. I was the heel. He was the babyface, and so he's slammed me in the middle, and I'm coming up, and he's going to go to the top. I'm going to catch him across. I'm going to catch him. He's going to give a cross body block to me, and down we go. However, when he got ready to jump off. His tassel got caught in the turnbuckle. He goes to jump and just does a face plant right there in the ring. I thought he'd killed himself. And I'm looking over at the referee. I think it was Dave. I can't remember if it was Dave or Earl Hebner. I said, he's dead, and they're like, oh my God, they're freaking out and they're going over there. And so, I mean, I'm just standing, I'm the heel. I just can't stand there and wait for him to untie Virgil's boot. So I go over there, and while he's trying to untie the boot, I'm putting the boots to Virgil. I'm kicking him in the head, Of course, I'm not really kicking him, but it looks like I'm trying to rip his head off, And finally, they got him untied, but he was goofy. I mean, he was out on his feet a bit. And so, how do we get out of this? I can't just, the company has invested all this money and time in Virgil to, keep him strong on TV and stuff like that. I just can't just beat him, So I go to pick him up. I pick him up, act like I fall backwards, lose my balance. He falls on top of me, 1, 2, 3, and we get out of it and live to fight another day. I guess.
Is there footage of that? Is there footage of that match?
I think that was just a house show. It was just a house show at the Maple Leaf Gardens. But it was sold out that day, and you can't. That would have ended well for my career if I'd have done that. I'm sure I would have gotten a phone call or an agent would have, gave me a notice on that and just sent me packing, I guess. But anyhow, it was sometimes you had to do some creative things. I know sometimes you've got things that I was always, okay, just give me the gist of what we're going to do. Don't lay out. I mean, I go out there for an hour and wrestle.
No need for a script.
But do not, don't give me that. That's and Virgil, and not to knock anybody here. I mean, these are just my experiences. Virgil liked to know everything from start to finish before he went out there. And I just wasn't that way. I was kind of taught that, because if you go out there and you I've got these 30 moves planned out, and you go out there and the people aren't with you, or the people aren't buying what you're doing, and you keep going to that script, then you're just, you have to call an audible. You have to, I'm working the crowd. I'm entertaining the crowd, and there's an art to that. But if I go out there and just read a script and the people don't buy it, then I've got no chance of winning them over to emotionally get invested in this match. They're not going to care one way or the other. And in that same match, a great example, Virgil wanted to do all this stuff at the very beginning of the match. And all right, Virgil, if that's what you want to do. We do all that stuff. And the people had already seen about 8 matches. I mean, they're already, pretty tired. They're waiting for the main event at this point, right?
Yeah.
So we do all that stuff and nobody does nothing. So he comes back in. I cut him off. Boom, boom, boom. I get on him, start getting some heat, and then I just grab him and put him in a reverse chin lock. I says, Virgil, we have to sit here for a little while. It's going to be uncomfortable for you, but I'm going to be fine. And I said, we're going to have to wait for these people to show up. And so Virgil, he not really quite maybe understanding what I was saying, but the people, we had done all this great moves and maneuvers and tickles and tackles, but they didn't buy any of it. So let's just sit here for a minute and let's if they're down, let's bring them down even a little bit more. So that's what we did. And so we sat there, and he's he's like trying to get away from me, and I had to hook him. So I hooked him, and I've got him down. I said, oh, no. I said, just wait a minute. They'll show up. And so as you're sitting there, and all of a sudden you start hearing a faint, Virgil. And then the next thing you know, the whole entire sold out, Toronto Maple Leaf Garden is chanting Virgil. Now they're emotionally invested in the match. Now we can do something, or, we're the ones, I'm the one pulling the strings here. They're not pulling our strings. And for some guys, that's kind of hard for them to understand. And so, it's a yo-yo there. And then, we'd get them up, and then I'd bring them back down, and get them up, and then bring them back down. And now I feel like we're in a great position. okay, now we can build them back up and then start your comeback. And then in your finish and your great crescendo, you're going to get the reaction that you want from the fans. And they're going to leave that night knowing, hey, you know what? That Reno Virgil match, that was a pretty good match too, versus, just all the way through the match and nothing good happening. And give them something to emote. Because if they're screaming, if they're sitting on their hands and, thinking, well, I think I'll go get some popcorn, that's not good. But if they're emotionally invested in what you're doing, then the ticket that they bought, the entertainment value of that just went up immensely. And so sometimes that was a little bit of what I had to do at times in working with guys, so
it seems like back in the day, like I've talked to a lot of wrestlers from your kind of era, and a lot of them say that, we had somewhat kind of creative control in our characters and in matches sometimes. That all seems to be gone these days. Did you ever get any advice, or what was your interactions like with Vince McMahon Jr., for example? Did he ever give you any in-ring advice?
No, he didn't really know anything when I was there. If it was any way, I'd be giving him advice. So, and he never, he was like really, really young when I was there and wasn't necessarily involved with the business that much. At that point, he kind of started coming on a bit more after my time there tapered down. So, I never really had any, besides, hey, what's going on, Shane, or in the locker room, or hey, how you doing? Other than that, didn't have much conversation with him whatsoever.
And what was a typical night like backstage in the 80s and the 90s in the WWF locker room?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. It was good. We had, if it was a house show, you're pretty much there at 6 o'clock. Matches generally 7:30, 8 o'clock, and everybody's sitting around. They play cards, or maybe there's a little area to work out at, depending on the building. But television was a long, grueling day. And this is before the time, and I'm speaking before the time of Monday Night Raw, when generally on Monday or Tuesdays and Wednesdays, it's been so long, but we would get there at about 2 o'clock. They would do pre-tapes with a lot of the talent. Of course, they, had it all catered so you could eat, and sometimes they'd have a little, gym set up. You could get a workout, or once you did whatever you needed to do, then you could go and get your workout on as long as you was back by 6. And then everybody starts, the road agents start pairing you up with like who your opponent's going to be, what hour of television you're going to be on, and then kind of what the gist of what they want. And so television was, like I said, it was a long, grueling time. And like when they started taping, they probably might start at 7 o'clock, and they may not end till 11. So you have people that are wrestling fans that thought they was coming to see Hulk Hogan take on Big Boss Man or something like that. So they're expecting maybe, 8 or 10 matches at the most. Well, they'd been there since 7 o'clock. Here it is 11, and they're still waiting for Hulk Hogan to take on Big Boss Man. In the meantime, they've already seen about 38 to 40 other matches. So even the most diehard of wrestling fans were just hanging on because they were so worn out. They had seen everything under the sun. And so the ring announcers in between matches would have to say, and remember tonight, our big main event, Hulk Hogan. So they kept having to pump that the whole night to keep the fans in their seats. So when you saw their television, that it was a, full sold out arena from Fort Wayne or from Indianapolis or from, Canton, Ohio, or wherever it was going to be, And so those were long and grueling, especially for, like, say I had third match of the night. So third match, I'm running out there and I'm wrestling on tape 1. And then you've got match 23, and I'm wrestling the fourth match on tape, or towards the last of tape 2. And then maybe I have another match on tape 3. I mean, there's been times I've ran out there 4 times in one night where I had 3 individual, and then maybe in a battle royal at the end or something, So TVs were very, very draining and tiresome, but it was a necessary evil because we didn't do a live event. We had 3 hours one night of Wrestling Challenge, 3 hours the next night of WWF Superstars, and then they would take those 6 hours and make a magazine type of show for on USA Network here in the U.S. was Prime Time. And it was kind of where they just, showed a clip here and showed a clip there, or showed a match in progress. Bobby Heenan, Gorilla Monsoon, they were the hosts of that show. So they were, of course, Vince, he's a genius, but they were trying to get the most out of their footage, and then start gearing things up for the pay-per-views.
I've got a random question for you, but it's something I've been trying to figure out on the podcast for a while. Is Scott Colton Randy Hogan?
Scott Colton, Randy. I do not know. I do not know Randy
Hogan's I thought you were the man that was going to sort this out. I just seen one of your tag matches. You tagged with Scott Colton, and there's an old internet rumor that Scott Colton and Randy Hogan are the same person, and I can see where it's coming from. But I had Randy Hogan on the show, and he said, "Nope, it's not me." But I still have a sneaky suspicion he might be lying.
Oh my goodness! Well, there's been times where someone has asked me, "Hey, have you seen such and such?" And I'm sitting there thinking, "Well, I don't even know who such and such is." But then it's their real name, and they come walking because really in our industry, even backstage, you still refer to someone in their character name. Like if Hulk Hogan comes walking through, you don't say, "Hey, Terry, how are you?" It's, "Hey, Hulk, what's up?" Or, whoever, Undertaker, you don't say, "Hey, Mark, how you doing?" You Dead Man or, Taker or whatever, So it's an industry where you just kind of, unlike, maybe the movies, like Sylvester Stallone, Rocky Balboa, when he's walking down the street, he's not Rocky Balboa. He's Sylvester Stallone. In our business, we're that character 24/7.
Yeah.
For the most part, So, to answer your question, I'm sorry I swung and whiffed on that.
Okay, we'll do a bit of research maybe outside. I'll send you a few things, and we could try piece the mystery together. Who was the one person you worked with that you worked with in the WWF that kind of, I know you were saying you're kind of had to be your character all the time, but was there anyone that springs to mind that just couldn't switch off of their character?
Oh yeah. Randy Savage. Randy Savage is when you hear the name, Randy Savage, Randy Savage never let people get close to Randy Poffo, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
He kept people at a distance. He did not let you get in that inner circle. He was I never had any issues with Randy. I always enjoyed getting the opportunity to wrestle him, but he was a guy that I always felt, and there's a difference too between living your gimmick and being the who you are in that gimmick. And he just, I mean, he wasn't Randy Poffo anytime I ever saw him. He was Randy Savage, and the Ultimate Warrior. Now, the Ultimate Warrior, he was another guy that not too many guys had personal relationships with him, as far as, hey, let's go out to dinner tonight, or hey, let's, hey, I need a ride to the next town. You got room? He wasn't a guy you even approached about that. You just, I'm not going to do that. I'll figure out another way, but he was a guy that I felt, I don't know if you say turn it on and turn it off, but I think that kind of fits more that definition of that type of guy that, can turn it on and turn it off, Jerry the King Lawler. He's Jerry the King Lawler anytime you ever see him, I mean, and
Still wrestling.
he keeps people, still getting after it. God bless him. He was growing up. He was a guy that I admired. And then after I got in the industry and got to know him a little bit, I consider one of the smartest, had one of the best psychological approaches and minds and creativity of, just about anyone that's ever put on a pair of wrestling boots. He's very, very smart, very intelligent, and very creative in the world of pro wrestling. He's also a great artist too. I don't know if many fans know that, but he was very good at drawings and stuff like that. So, but hopefully that answers some. I mean, I'm sure if I think about it longer, I could probably even come up with even more, because guys that are pro wrestlers, it's a different animal. Some guys aren't dealing with the full deck,
Yeah, I do find, even from doing this show, and I do ask like wrestlers to come on the show, and I think a lot of them are really reserved and paranoid, and they get me like, oh, make sure and call me maybe 2 or 3 days beforehand and talk.
Yeah.
And then I'd be talking just like we're talking now. But I think you need to build up that element of trust with guys as well, particularly guys from the 80s and 90s. That's what I find anyway with them.
Yeah. It seems like when we were kind of, and even guys before my time, everybody, sits back and analyzes. Well, why'd they ask me that? What's going on with that? What's his angle on this? Yeah. What's he, and so that's kind of the, I guess the mentality, I've always been kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. So it's never really, maybe I wasn't smart enough to keep people at bay or, but I just take it as it is and, just go from there, roll with the punches.
What's the funniest thing you ever seen backstage at a wrestling event?
Oh, God.
It's really putting you on the spot now, isn't it?
Yeah. How many days do we have to talk here? I mean, I could go on forever on this, Okay. So a couple of guys that I really liked and admired, always had really good matches with them too, was the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott Steiner. Mm-hmm. And so I'd wrestled them quite a few times up to this point in my career. And one day they were, they were kind of getting kind of froggy in the locker room, and they were kind of saying a couple of things to Barry Horowitz, and Barry, he's a mind his own business kind of guy, just, not wanting to get in any kind of locker room mischief or anything like that, So they were talking. I think Barry was a high school wrestling champion, and other guys in the locker room were going, well, Rick, Scott, you're not the only one that's a great amateur wrestler here. Barry Horowitz is, a great amateur wrestler, and so they were like, oh, Barry, well, if you think you'd like to do something, and Barry's not saying nothing. They're just kind of joking, but Barry doesn't know this, right? So I'm feeling kind of froggy myself. And I go, well, Barry, aren't you going to do something? You're just going to stand there and take that from him. I go, I know I wouldn't. And the next thing I know, Scott has grabbed me and we're wrestling in the floor, right? And so doggone it, I mean, he wrestled at Michigan, right? So I mean, he's legit, right? So I'm fighting for my life, and he's just toying with me, right? And then his brother gets in on it. So Rick and Scott both are on me. Then they grab the duct tape. So I'm in the middle of the locker room, and they duct tape my feet. They duct tape my hands behind my back to my feet. And so then they go, well, let's duct tape his eyes shut. And I was like, oh my God, I panicked then, because I was like, these guys probably could kill me, And so at the time, I didn't think it was very funny. But looking back on it, Looking back, because here comes the punchline now. So I'm like, oh God, please don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. So they end up leaving me alone. Somebody comes and cuts me loose, And so I'm really kind of about half hot now, but they're just over just chuckling, about half. I'm not total hot, I'm not an idiot, but I said, I'm going to get those guys. I'm going to get those guys. And so I go and I look who I'm wrestling that night, and I'm in a tag match with the Steiners. And I was like, crap, And Rick, he comes by and he goes, did you see who you're working with tonight? Don't try no funny stuff, And so we got out there, and those guys are pros. When we went out there and had a heck of a match, and it was a lot of fun. But I've seen them do the old duct tape routine to other folks after that, too. We were in, we was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, at Western Kentucky University. I'm wrestling Terry Taylor, Red Rooster. They're on there. They may have been wrestling the Head Shrinkers. I don't know. It was a pretty good card that night. And so every now and then they would bring in guys that were local to come in and fill in with a match or so. And there was a gentleman, and he was a midget. He was a short guy. I don't know if that's back in my day, everybody, hey, the guys, he's a midget, and I don't say that to knock anybody or discredit someone. That's what we said back then, short people but even on the poster, it was advertised midget wrestling,
Midget wrestling. Okay. Yep.
Midget wrestling, so if anybody's out there that fits that bill, I'm not saying that to be ugly or anything. It's just, I'm just telling the story here. So, So this guy comes in, and he's, like I said, he's a midget, and he's going to wrestle another short guy, and usually, like, if you're not one of the established guys, you're just kind of Johnny come lately. You don't come in and start taking over the locker room with conversation or stuff like. You just come in. You may say, introduce yourself to everybody, and get your bag and sit in the corner and keep your mouth shut. That's kind of the way it worked,
Yeah.
But this guy comes in like he's, intercontinental champion or something, he's coming in like, and everybody's looking around there going, do you know this guy? I remember the Steiners look at me and they go, you know this guy? I go, I don't know him. So anyway, a few minutes later comes along, and one of the agents, and I believe it may have been Tony Gurria, he's coming. He goes, hey, you seen the midget? He's getting ready to go on. And I said, I don't know. I hadn't seen him. I've been over here warming up. And so they couldn't find him. He goes, look, go grab Terry. You guys are going on next. And so we, go on and come back, and they're still looking for this guy, right? And so I don't know. Maybe he got, maybe somebody said something to him. He got mad and left. I don't know. So I'm walking down this hallway, and it's kind of like a high school locker, high school hallway, and you got all these lockers on each side. And I get down to the very end of this hallway, and I hear I go, what is that? And I hear it coming from inside of a locker, and I go over to it, and I open it up, and the midget is hanging upside down, duct taped. I knew what happened to him. So then here's the dilemma that I have. Do I help him get down, cut him loose, or go tell the agent, hey, I saw him down there hanging up? So then, if that happens, the Steiner's going to be mad at me, right?
Yeah.
I just politely shut the door and walk off. I was like, oh, my goodness. So
brilliant.
I thought that was pretty funny.
That's excellent stuff. I'm going to bring in a little guest here, and we're going to talk about something that you have coming up.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Hello, Shane.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hey, Shane.
How you doing?
Doing good, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party. We're having a bit of, as we say in Ireland, we're having good crack here tonight. It means we're having fun. We're not doing cocaine, but we're just having fun.
No. Those days are over.
Look, we're going to have a look at this figure, Shane, and if you want to tell us through where you're at with it, what's going down.
It's
The floor is yours.
what we do is I do a full month of pre-orders, and then after that, then I submit everything to the manufacturer, and then they handle everything. We do the old it's kind of like a dying style, really. Nobody does Galoob style anymore. So that's what we wanted to do, the old Galoob style from the WCW from around 1990. And the packaging looks pretty much like the old Galoob style packaging. And it's what they call collector friendly. So you can open up the plastic and remove the figure, beat him up, and then put him back, and you put him back in there. So it's
Story of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I had your cousin said he couldn't wait to get some so he could beat his cousin up.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. I enjoy it, man. It gives me something to do, and I did it mainly for I wanted to release figures of people that influenced me when I was in the business. And Reno, I'd watched him. I remember the day, the first time I ever seen him, 14 years old, watching either Saturday morning or Sunday morning, working Hercules. Reno Riggins, up and coming young athlete here in the World Wrestling Federation. And then he and I have a mutual friend that really, and I worked a few shows with him, and it just, I thought, that'd be awesome. We got to do a Reno Riggins figure. And he said yes, and we run with it, and I'm tickled to death. I really am.
Yeah. When is it going to come out, guys?
It'll be the pre-order ends February the 11th, and it usually takes maybe a month or so to get everything together. They're all hand painted, and they're all made on the Anycubic, and I'd say give it 2 months after I submit the money.
Excellent. What I'll do, Shane, is I'll get the details off you, and I'll put them in underneath this video just in case people want to check it out and order the figure as well. Reno, it was a pleasure. Shane, thanks for jumping on and talking about that. I'm gonna leave you with one more question, Reno, about Barry Horowitz and about Bret Hart. Bret Hart made some comments. I think it was last year, and he said that Barry deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Do you think that enhancement talent that put a lot of years into the business, like Barry and multiple others, should be considered for Hall of Fame places rather?
Well, it's I mean, it's a very good question. And when I answer this, I don't want to come off as bitter or sour grapes or someone that's using a platform to toot my own horn or defend my friend or anything of that nature. I feel like the WWE Hall of Fame, to try to make logic of an illogical business or industry, can drive a sane man mad, if that makes any sense. I'll just give an example. When you see all the Hollywood movies and awards that come out, one of the things that any actor or actress would probably cut off both arms to have is a supporting role, best supporting role. And what we do or did, I think what we did in our industry is dead. I don't think that, guys coming out being enhancement talent will ever be revisited, because the value of the television time is so valuable these days that they want to try to drive home a certain point every chance that they get with two guys that they're going to try to, market and merchandise and draw income from. So, but I do feel like guys like Barry Horowitz, Iron Mike Sharp, Mike Jackson, who was down at Georgia Championship Wrestling or WCW there for the longest. I think he's still wrestling. George South, I think he's still going as well. I think that there has to be you cannot have a hall of wrestling stars if you don't have a hall of the guys that put them there. The guys like Barry Horowitz and myself and Iron Mike Sharp and Brooklyn Brawler and the list goes on. And there's so many guys out there that are deserving of that. You cannot have a hall of stars if you don't have the hall of the guys that put them there. And so if you know anything a little bit about baseball, one of the most honorable things a baseball player can do for his team is what's called a sacrifice bunt, meaning he's giving up himself for an out to move his teammate to the next base. He's sacrificing himself. Whereas we all sacrificed part of our career to help benefit someone else. And so I think, in my opinion, that those guys are more than deserving of being in there. And like I said, you cannot have a star if you do not have the carpenter that built the star. And a lot of times carpenters was referred to as what I used to do. I know my good friend Wolfie D hates that term. If he's ever watching this, well, and we had a discussion about that a few weeks ago. But anyhow, I feel like you can't have a legitimate Hall of Stars if you don't have recognition, for guys that helped, get those guys there. Because a lot of my job at one point when I was there, after I'd been there and was established for a few years, my job was, hey, we're bringing in Adam Baum, and we want to see what type of worker he is. Go out and have a match with him. Yeah. Oh, okay. Hey, we're bringing in this guy named Glenn Jacobs. We want you to have his very first match with you and let us know how he does. Or we're bringing in a guy named Duke the Dumpster. We're going to think about doing this character with this guy named Duke the Dumpster. And can you, have a match with him and tell us how he does? So when I hear, is possibility of a guy like Horowitz or Iron Mike or myself or any of those guys to be mentioned, I think that it's not only deserving, it's more than deserving, and it's a shame that it's been overlooked for this long. And generally the people that are making the decisions for who we're going to put in the hall or not put in the hall, those guys all had careers where they were on top, and they don't see it from where I sit. And because I'd like to ask, a lot of those guys, who did you beat? You beat nobody. It's fantasy. It's Hollywood. It's a movie. I remember once I had a cousin who wants to take the action figure and beat me up, but I told him, he says, when you're on TV all the time, why don't they ever let you win? I says, let me explain something to you. I said, that's not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is when I go to the bank, they say, do they ask me, sir, can I deposit this for you? And that's the answers that I wanted to have come when I was doing what I was doing. So I think more than deserving.
Yeah, I had actually, when you're talking about winning and losing, I had Paul Roma on the show last year, and he was pretty angry with Ric Flair at the time, and the two guys don't get along anyway, Roma and Flair. And Paul said, "Do you really think, Rick, that you've won 16 championships? Do you really believe that?" Because obviously he has won them, but he was like, "They're not real matches, Rick. You wouldn't stand a chance." I just thought it was funny the way he came out with it, but I know what you're saying.
It is like you said. Yeah, nobody beat. Now here's the thing too. If pro wrestling was legitimate, like UFC, probably 90% of the guys that you see in it, they're not in it. They're doing something else, because not everybody in the pro wrestling world was a tough guy. Yep. Okay. And so, it's some guys were great performers. Shawn Michaels, it doesn't get any better as far as being a performer, and I'm not questioning his manhood or anything like that, but I think he would agree, he's not going to, now he'd probably, defend himself and take a butt whipping, too, but he's not going to, come off as a tough guy, or be a tough guy, guy that, kind of can avoid a lot of fights just because of the reputation that he comes in with, and so, but as far as a performer goes, there's nobody any better, in my opinion. In my whole entire life of watching pro wrestling, although I don't watch much of today's product. It's an era that for me is come and gone, and I've moved on with my life. But during that time and during that heyday, when you're going from sold out arena to sold out arena to sold out arena, and you're riding from town to town on a private jet and living life good, everybody's making money, then as far as being a performer, I not very many, can say that they're better than Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, once again, great performer, Bret Hart, great performer, I mean, they put their heart and soul into it, but it would be a whole totally different industry if it was legitimate, and so once again, you've beaten nobody, but when you've given the opportunity to run with the ball, you've carried it and delivered, and so you can't have the star if you don't have the person that made them.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic way, I think, to end the show today. I have loads of more questions that I didn't get to ask you, so we might get you on again. We might get you on again maybe soon if you have the time, and I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, I love this. I love talking. If there's two things I love talking about, it's pro wrestling and myself.
And Shane,
just kidding.
and Shane, thanks for coming on, man, and best of luck with the figure. And I'll put all the details underneath. And
thank you
have a great day, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.